You finally sent your capabilities deck. You hit send, you exhale, and then nothing. Now, what do? Do you wait? Do you follow up? How soon? A lot of the agencies I work with are treating that follow up period like a complete guessing game. But the reality is, those weeks after you send your deck, that's where the real money is made. So, in this video, I'm going to talk you through exactly what to do after you send your capabilities deck, step by step, so you can stop hoping you get a response, start systematizing your process, and double your close rate. And I'm Lindsay Christian. I've designed hundreds of decks for some of the biggest brands and celebrities in the world. And now I run an agency that focuses exclusively on creating capabilities decks for agencies that want to close more clients. So here's what nobody talks about. Most agencies actually lose the deal after they send the deck. And it's not because their work isn't good, it's because they have no process in place for what comes next. By the end of this video, you'll know how to track every pitch so that nothing falls through the cracks, the exact follow up system that closes deals without feeling pushy, how to spot patterns that tell you who to chase and who to drop, and how to use all of that data to refine your next pitch so that you can close much faster, much easier, and more often. So when I first started sending decks, I would kind of just hit send and hope for the best. Sometimes a prospect would reply. Most times it was crickets. But when I really started tracking everything, who I was sending it to, how long it took them to respond, who didn't respond or did respond, what were they saying in the responses? Once I really started tracking that, everything changed for my agency. I was able to see which prospects, responded more quickly, which offers closed more quickly, which prospects were really getting what I was selling, immediately versus others that were dragging out the process or that I had to do kind of multiple calls with. So all of this data and feedback I was collecting really helped me to refine my pitch and my entire process and my entire system, and really helped me start to close more and grow my agency more quickly. And this is really the difference between kind of hoping you close clients and creating a systematic process to close clients more efficiently, not just with a great deck, but with the entire system around your capabilities deck. And so the first step in this process is to track every outreach. So if you're not tracking who you're sending your deck to, essentially you're flying blind. You need a record of every single person you've sent your deck to. It's a non-negotiable. You can do this easily with a CRM, something like ActiveCampaign or Notion or HubSpot. Or if you're just starting, you can even use a simple Google Sheet, but there's some key things that you want to track. So obviously, their name, their company, the date that you sent the deck to them, their response or lack of one if they haven't responded. So you should keep, a toggle responded, hasn't responded, etc. Then some key follow-up dates, so the dates that you want to go out and do your follow-up outreach to them, and then any key notes that they've left. So either notes from that initial conversation with them or any key notes from follow-ups with them. So for example, they're not ready for now, they want to follow up in second quarter or next quarter, or they need to wait for board approval. So just keeping kind of those key notes front and center for you, so who's in the pipeline and kind of where they are in the process. And this isn't busy work. This is literally how you level up your sales process. It's going to be invaluable to keep this updated, whether it's in a CRM or a Google Sheet. So, it's not just about focusing on your deck, but really also focusing on all of those follow-ups. At what frequency are people getting back to you? Who's closing, who's not? All of this is valuable data you can use to improve your process. And then second up, you want to build a consistent follow-up cadence. It took me a couple months to really get into the flow, but now everything I do in terms of follow-up is calendared. So, once you sent your deck, these follow-ups are going to be basically essentially where you win or lose the deal. For my process, I like to do follow-ups immediately after the call. So I'll do a sales call with them. I'll send, they've seen the deck, ideally they've already walked through the deck on their own. I've walked them through it. After that initial call with them, I follow up immediately, recap the call, re-include a link to the deck just so they have everything in one email. But you want to make sure anytime you talk to a client on the phone, you're sending them an email to kind of recap them, so it's super easy for them to take the next step with you. And then, and then also you can have a book a call link in there. So whatever that next step is you want them to take, make sure everything is summarized in one email, your deck is relinked, and then that next step is very clear and highlighted in the email. And then I like to follow up once a week thereafter. So every week you're staying top of mind, you're checking in, you're seeing if they have questions, you're asking if they like to book a follow-up call. And pro tip, these can be canned pre-written emails that you save in a document. So I'll have all of my follow-up emails, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, ready to go. So I can just copy paste them into the email provider that I use. You can even save them as templates in your email provider. I know Gmail allows you to do that. But you definitely want to make it kind of like an easy, seamless, repeatable process on your end. And then, have these, key metrics and things that you might want to use to kind of beef up those emails. So for example, one thing I like to do is to drop a few key case studies that aren't in my core capabilities deck, just to kind of show them and remind them, that you can deliver on what you promised, that you have new examples of case studies and work that you've done, new visuals for them to look at. So just something to think about to plus up those emails a little bit more. But this is super important. Like I said, email right after the call and then every week for a month. And then once you've done that, you can then move them into a more general email nurture list. So, if they've responded and the conversation is going, stay one-on-one with them and keep replying and try to get them to the close. But if you haven't heard anything or they've kind of ghosted you, you can kind of move them into your regular email nurture. So whether that's your newsletter, your email list, or just a list you keep of, leads that have gone cold that maybe you follow up with quarterly or once a month. But the key here is consistency. So this is where tools help. I personally use ActiveCampaign as my CRM. It shows me my pipeline. It allows me to put in any kind of notes for calls that I've had with clients. But I can also see what phase they're in. So if they're in follow-up, it'll flag them. If they're in nurture, it'll show that. And then, I like to use Google Tasks to easily schedule these follow-ups so that they're actually in my calendar. So, a cool feature of Google Tasks is that you can actually attach a task directly to an email. So, I'll click the email, I'll schedule it as a task, I'll add a due date for it. So that populates the task into my calendar and it's in my task list. And then whenever, I check my task list every day, if I see that a follow-up is owed to somebody, I can just easily click the email, hit reply, drop in the pre-canned kind of draft email and just hit send. So, you click the email, you draft from template, you send, you change a task date. It's all pretty seamless if you do it with Google Tasks. So just something to think about if Gmail is your email provider. But the key is, you don't have to guess. You don't have to worry, like, did I follow up with them? Everything is being tracked. Everything is being monitored and everything is in email. So you can easily refer back to it to see kind of what the last correspondence was with them. And then finally, you want to collect data. So every pitch you send is giving you data. You just have to pay attention. So you want to start tracking things like, who closed fastest. So which industries, which client types, which company sizes, this will show you who's really valuing your work. It can help you kind of narrow down that ideal client that you're targeting as you're starting to refine your pitch. You also want to look at who hesitated, who had objections, what were common objections that kept coming up. So these objections are valuable. You should be ready to address them in your next pitch. Sometimes I even suggest to clients to address them, proactively in their deck so that, when the client is receiving the deck or going through the pitch initially, you're kind of addressing them right up front. But just make sure to keep track of any objections you're getting so you can talk to them and speak to them, whether it's in the follow-up process or in the initial pitch. Which services do your prospects actually need most? So if you offer kind of a suite of services, which services are you getting more traction on? That's a great indicator of maybe what you should be leading with in your pitch. If you do web design, social media marketing campaigns and paid ads and everybody's saying, okay, well, we need to start with social media campaigns, maybe that's kind of your new intro offer or that first offer that you highlight in your deck and talk about most, or maybe more of your case studies are centered around that type of work. So again, hearing which offers and services prospects are leaning into is super important. And then which slides got the best reactions. So this can be slides that drum up interest in the actual live pitch. A prospect can mention, oh my God, I love, the case study on XYZ. So anytime a prospect is calling out a slide or mentioning a slide or saying, I love this on a call, be sure to flag that. That's super important to help refine your pitch. Maybe you move that slide earlier in the deck, make other slides that are kind of, duplicates of that slide, but with different information. And this is how you can really start to refine and tweak that pitching process across the board. And another pro tip, if you listen to my channel, I love a platform called pitch.com. You can also use Canva, but basically any platform that has backend analytics where you can really see who's opening your deck, what time, the amount they're spending on different slides. This is critical data that you can use to help refine not only your deck, but your overall pitch. So for example, if a prospect is spending a ton of time on one slide, maybe you move that slide earlier in the deck to get engagement drummed up early, or maybe that's even a slide you could use and pull out in that email sequence when you're following up with prospects to drip that out to them later to just keep that excitement alive, remind them of that slide that they liked, of the work that you did. Maybe it's a case study. So I always encourage our clients to use any kind of online platform where you're getting that analytics tracking. This is just an example, of pitch, so you can kind of see what it looks like, but it really is going to give you another level of insights that can help separate you from your competitors and in general, help you refine, your pitching process, your follow-up process, and in general, how you're structuring your deck and your pitch to close more clients. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to go deeper into this and build a real system around your capabilities deck, from narrowing down your services to designing an actual killer deck to tracking outreach and really drafting all of those really important follow-up emails, what you should do in between, etc. I go through all of this and more in my school community, the Capabilities Deck Lab. You get access to real decks, battle-tested workflows, amazing templates, and just a community of agency owners who are all working together to really level up their capabilities deck so they can close more clients. The link to join is in the description below. But honestly, setting your deck is the easy part. Winning with it, that's where the real work begins. So if you want to see the top patterns that separate the decks that win from the decks that get ignored, pulled from over 500 capabilities decks that I personally tore apart, check out this video.